Joining us now, former Texas Congressman and Republican presidential candidate Will Hurd. Good to have you on.
Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. Let's start with issues right now. Tell me, what do you think the key issue is that other Republicans in the race, the media in the race, talking heads in the race just aren't getting right?
Well, I think right now, the number one concern that voters have when they bring things up with me when I'm crisscrossing the country is jobs and the economy. It's always that. We talk about it in a very specific way, what's happening with inflation in any single day. But the reality is, over the last 23 years, we've seen the cost of goods and services increase 3 times faster than average salaries. And that's something that is driving some of the concern and fear that people have for the future. You put that on top of the fact that people are scared of some of these new technologies that are coming. 65% of Americans are afraid that robots are going to take their jobs. And this is one of those issues that not enough people are talking about, how we can take advantage of technology before it takes advantage of us. And it's one of those questions I get asked every place I go on the stump.
Congressman, let's talk about immigration, because you certainly know about immigration because your district obviously went along the border. We used to hear about complaints from Republicans and Democrats alike that were along the border about how it was chaotic and out of control. Now we're starting to hear it from New York City Mayor Eric Adams. We're starting to hear it from the Massachusetts governor, Illinois, other governors that are Democratic governors that are now saying it's overwhelming, it's too much. Mm-hmm. We couldn't really talk about this issue so much without there being more heat than light. Mm-hmm. During the Trump era. He talked about a wall. It was mainly symbolic. Republicans in Congress, Lindsey Graham, John Cornyn, others saying, well, the wall's not the answer, but we could never get past that. I talked to small business owners. They want more immigration. I talked to leaders in Silicon Valley. They want more immigration. They want it legal, but they want more immigration. How do we fix this? Republicans and Democrats alike both have reasons to come together and fix this crisis. How do we do it?
Sure. And look, I would even add 70% of Republican primary voters want to see us streamline legal immigration. At a time when every industry needs more employees, this is an opportunity. So first and foremost, you actually need leaders who are interested in solving the problem rather than using this as a political bludgeon against each one of us. But the steps that we have to take, we have to first address the current influx of illegal immigration that's coming in the country. That starts by not treating everybody as an asylum seeker. Asylum's a real thing. Asylum should be used. Asylum should be provided. But when people abuse asylum, then the people that actually need it are the ones that are impacted.
Can I ask you, Congressman? Sure. Congressman, can I ask you first on asylum? Because this is so important. We Americans have always accepted people across the world seeking asylum. It is, you see it with the Statue of Liberty. It is what makes us different than so many other countries on the globe. But people knowing that's their ticket in may abuse that process. Yes. How in the world do we sort through those who are seeking political asylum, religious asylum, asylum for personal reasons, with those who are just abusing the system? How in the world do we ever sort through that?
Well, it starts with to apply for asylum. You're supposed to be part of a protected class, meaning it's gender, sexual orientation, or religion. There are a number of specific areas. And then your government has to be persecuting you because you're part of that protected class. Or the government is not protecting you against a third party who is persecuting you because you're part of that protected class. And we know those kinds of places around the world. That's one of the responsibilities of the State Department, is to understand these macro trends that are happening in those countries. And so you can start by saying you give extra attention, focus to those individuals that are in those places. One other way we address this is the human smugglers are the ones that are telling people that are abusing the system what to say and what to do. So let's dismantle the human smuggling networks that are throughout Central and South America. If you think about the smugglers just in Mexico alone, 5.5 million people came in this country illegally. They each get about $10,000. That's $55 billion. So let's start treating human smugglers and drug trafficking. And Joe, to give me some context of that number, the entire U.S. intelligence budget is $60 billion. So let's dismantle these human smuggling networks. Let's treat them like the terrorist organizations. We know how to hunt Al-Qaeda and ISIS. We know how to dismantle these networks. And that requires us to be working with our allies throughout Central and South America. You can do those two things, and you start addressing people that are taking advantage of the asylum system. And then you can start talking about how do you streamline legal immigration. It's 2023. We should be able to determine that Massachusetts needs more school bus drivers, Texas needs more hospitality workers, and Florida needs more agriculture workers, and Americans aren't applying for those jobs. So then you can say, hey, now let's have people come here legally. And guess what? They come here legally. They're paying the State Department and the federal government, not human smugglers, and they're paying taxes and contributing to our society. And so this is something that we should be able to do. And it starts by Republicans and Democrats talking. A guy like Pete Aguilar from California, a Democrat, and I work together to put a plan. And so all of these ideas I've just outlined exist. We need people that have the political will to solve it.
Congressman, I want to ask you about some of the rhetoric being used here. Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is vowing to leave suspected drug smugglers, quote, stone cold dead at the southern border if he's elected president. Here's what he said on Friday in Atlanta.
We are going to authorize the use of deadly force against the cartels. If you have somebody coming in with the fentanyl in the backpack, they even break through the border wall where there is wall. If they're doing that, that's the last thing they're going to be able to do, because we're going to leave them stone cold dead at the border.
What?
All right. So this sounds like Donald Trump talking about shooting people in the legs outside the White House or down at the border. What's your response to that?
Look, the Ron DeSantis campaign is circling the drain, and he's trying to talk tough to try to be a clone of Donald Trump. And people that talk tough, usually it's because they don't have experience or with a particular issue. And look, there's some nuance in this. Could we be working with the Mexican government to help address drug trafficking organizations that are killing Americans and killing Mexicans? Absolutely. But that requires a partnership. Mexico is our most important trade partner. Now, I will say, under the current administration, the bilateral relationship between the United States and Mexico is the worst that it's ever been. We should be using intelligence in order to target the infrastructure and destroy the infrastructure that is moving people and product into the illegal product like drugs into the country. Fentanyl, I think fentanyl should be treated like a WMD, a weapon of mass destruction. We wouldn't allow precursor elements of a dirty bomb into the country. Why are we letting a poison that has killed 109,000 Americans last year into the country? But we need to be articulating real strategies. And unfortunately, people that think they've been to the border once, that's understanding of the border. Every mile of the border is different. And look, the northern border, I'm the only candidate that's actually been to the northern border. In the last 9 months, we've seen the number of apprehensions in the northern border increase more than the last 9 years. That's a problem. We need serious people that are going to work across the aisle and work with our partners around the world to solve this particular issue. And that's why I'm running for president. Okay. So if people like that, go to herforamerica.com.
All right. For former Texas Congressman and Republican presidential candidate Will Hurd, thank you very much.